one of my issues at the moment with traditional marketing setups within startups is we look to the finance team to set the goal, and the CRO even sometimes isn't as involved as like finance and the CEO in setting the goal for new revenue for the year. So you get a revenue target, and then finance also gives you a budget that they feel comfortable with. But it's very much top-down planning versus reverse engineering that goal. So if the revenue goal truly is, 10 million ARR for the year, you should be understanding like how are we actually how much budget would it actually take based on previous conversion rates to actually hit that revenue number. Not, okay, my finance team or my CEO wants to do 10 million ARR this year. My finance team will only give me, $1 million in budget. I need to make that work. We as marketers, we're often just accepting of that. Okay, this is my challenge for this year is to go after this, impossible pursuit.
That was Sarah, and this is Social 3.0, the podcast dedicated to helping you drive growth through content and communities. In this episode, I sit down with Sarah Breathnach, Director of Demand Gen at Hunters. Sarah and I talk about the importance of realistic metric setting and how to set tangible goals that are realistic in nature, something that I think all marketers can learn from. Also, we talk about the rise of personality-led growth and the impact that's having on businesses. And also, it turns out that virality or going viral is Sarah and I's trigger word as we share some stories about what going viral actually means. And I think underpinning all of this is Sarah's wonderfully balanced approach to marketing in general, representing the kind of challenge and the duopoly that many modern marketers face, the commercial realities and the tracked nature of leads and commercial targets, and balancing that with the brand building nuance of social media. This is a fantastic discussion. I really enjoyed it, and I really hope you will do too.
To get started with, because I think there's a lot of goodness we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about how social impacts demand gen, and there's a term that you shared with me which really resonated, like personality-led growth. So I want to get into that. But before we get into all that goodness, I'd love for you to give the listeners a bit of context on your journey and how you've got to where you are today, and what is it that you do today.
Yeah, of course, I'd be happy to. First of all, thank you for having me here today, Andy. Super cool office here in London, and I think it's the first podcast I've ever done in person.
Hey, there we go. So, love that.
Yeah, it's a first for me. In terms of my journey, I'm originally from Ireland. I moved to the US a year after graduating university, and I was really looking for this opportunity to start my career in marketing in the US and kind of live out this dream of what I saw in the movies and on TV as a young kid growing up in Ireland. So I worked in tech for 3 years. I probably have the most linear career path in demand generation. Most people who are really successful in marketing don't even start with a marketing background, but I studied marketing. I got a demand gen internship.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Went through all of the stages of working for demand gen leaders, and then became one myself after a few years. And I've worked at 3 startups, currently working at Hunters, which is very quickly growing cybersecurity startup based out of Israel. It's my first venture into the cybersecurity industry. And when working at Hunters, we were a 50-person company. We've grown to like triple that size in 3 years, which has been really interesting.
Oh, yeah,
Learned a lot. And I've also been growing my own presence on LinkedIn. And it's something I'm really passionate about, is both, business leaders and personalities within a business posting on social media to promote their own personal brand and also to help their business grow. So I think we'll get into a lot of it today.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to it. So let's talk about the podcast for a second, because you run the 7K Social Club podcast as well. So I really enjoyed it, and I quite liked it how you've essentially framed it around your journey of going from, initially from 1 to 7K, but I think you're 12,000 plus now. But yeah, what was the kind of genesis and inspiration behind the podcast then?
The inspiration behind the podcast was working at startups where marketing was just being done the wrong way, usually not at the the fault of the marketing team. Usually the marketing team has the best intentions, but I think the pressure that they get from sales leaders like CROs who just want more leads, and people who are kind of approaching marketing as it's not that hard, just figure it out, just spend more money, just do more activity, just, do more lead gen. And as a marketer who feels very passionate about doing things the right way and thinking about the buyer and like, does the buyer actually want to be marketed to in this way? And also, are we seeing an impact of our marketing work in terms of pipeline, in terms of revenue? I'm never a person who just wants to create as many leads as possible. I'm all about the end result, which is, we've got bills to pay and we want to really, really grow. So that was the beginning of my journey really on social media. Started at Hunters, was able to approach marketing in a completely different way with the CMO who was very, very progressive and open-minded and wanted to kind of rebel against the status quo of doing either boring marketing or the stereotypes in cybersecurity, which is everything is like a hacker in a hoodie and all the brands are like really, really dark and moody. We went the opposite approach there. So kind of documenting that experience and also encouraging other marketers to do marketing in, the right way, in my opinion, is why I started my journey on social media and also the podcast.
I love it. And that's one of the things that initially raised my awareness to you anyway, because on LinkedIn, seeing your posts where you are challenging the status quo, you are questioning like, why are we doing this? Like measuring badge scans is not a KPI, for example, at events. And I've been in that process before where you're like, just scan a badge and it'll be fine. And just pouring more in the top doesn't always, very rarely helps. Right. So when I say pouring more leads ultimately, or leads as we'll call it. So that's the thing that really stood out to me. I always respect people that really question how we do things today. And like, let's dig into that a little bit more, especially as it relates to Hunters and challenging the status quo that you mentioned. And before we do that, actually, for anyone listening, because a lot of people that will be listening to this will be like social media marketers or marketing managers or whatever, demand gen might not be something that they're familiar with. So give us a bit of a flavour of like what the role of you in demand gen actually entails.
It's my favourite question to answer.
Cool. Good.
To me, demand generation is the art and science of spending money to make money. So it's really like, to me, demand gen leader is the person who is having probably the most influence in terms of where the budget is spent. And one of my issues at the moment with traditional marketing setups within startups is we look to the finance team to set the goal, and the CRO even sometimes isn't as involved as like finance and the CEO in setting the goal for new revenue for the year. So you get a revenue target, and then finance also gives you a budget that they feel comfortable with. But it's very much top-down planning versus reverse engineering that goal. So if the revenue goal truly is, 10 million ARR for the year, you should be understanding like, how are we actually, like how much budget would it actually take based on previous conversion rates to actually hit that revenue number? Not, okay, my finance team or my CEO wants to do 10 million ARR this year. And my finance team will only give me, $1 million in budget. I need to make that work. We as marketers, we're often just accepting of that. Okay, this is my challenge for this year is to go after this, impossible pursuit.
Do more with less is the same objective usually every year for a marketer.
And I think we can do much better if we just start in the beginning as, okay, we're the demand gen leadership. This is the math or the numbers behind what you're asking us to do. Like the math does not compute. Like it just it does not compute. Like your product team could tell you, okay, this doesn't make sense, and they can, go back to the drawing board and negotiate with the CEO and the finance team. But as a marketing team, we often feel like it's our goal. We just need to achieve it. Like there's some kind of magic involved there, but there isn't a lot of magic. It's a lot of, hey, the numbers need to add up, and we're not superhuman here. Like we're marketing people and we're talented at what we do, but we can't, magic this pipeline. It's just not going to happen.
I'm with you. So when we think about like the channels and where you'll be applying the budget that you're given for the year, so particularly for you in your current role at Hunters, where where do you typically prioritize some of the budget? Where are the channels that you'll focus on most?
So I think unfortunately for a lot of small teams that work in cybersecurity is old school. And I think the downside of old school is it's very trade show heavy. It's very, in-person networking. It's very relationship driven.
Gotcha.
It's very channel driven. So these things take a lot of time and they cost a lot of money. Like the biggest trade shows in cyber are always in, San Francisco or Las Vegas. And your booth sponsorship alone, just to do the bare minimum is, it's probably going to cost you all in almost $100,000 just to do the bare minimum, which is pretty shocking. So I would say that's the downside, is a lot of the budget gets eaten up by these trade shows and events that you kind of need to do, and they're very expensive when you explain what's involved to your finance team. But I would also say the upside of working in an old school industry like cyber is there's a huge opportunity for disruption. Like you can get creative and really, really stand out because there is not a lot of creativity.
That's interesting. You got any examples of like how you've stepped out of like the normal paradigms that would exist in cyber?
I think some of my favorite examples are from other organizations, and there's an organization called Torque, and they're a SOAR solution. So it's essentially like how companies respond to incidents that happen in cybersecurity.
Okay.
And they've hired a woman named Brittany, and she comes from a sports background, like interviewing, like sports media. So like she's a sports interviewer.
Okay.
Now working in cybersecurity, interviewing their customers and creating these really cool short form videos. So I like companies that are just doing something that's never really been done in an industry before. I think it's extremely impressive because it takes a lot of courage to actually say, hey, we're going to do this differently.
I'm with you. Totally with you. So then you're quite passionate about social in general, right? Social media. So how do you then reconcile, and we're speaking about this off camera, but how do you reconcile your targets, the things that you've got to do? Your job is to create demand, achieve these revenue targets, etc. But social is then that nebulous thing that we know is very important, or the impacts of brand, but very hard to attribute, and correlate what we do on social with revenue. So how are you kind of navigating that at Hunters, and how are you navigating in other businesses too?
I think it's a question that we could probably spend all day answering because there's so many different facets to it. And I think I have been a big advocate for like business leaders to be active on social media and to be speaking about their vision. I think I'm very adamant about CEOs, co-founders getting their message out there. But I think if your CEO really doesn't want to do it, you can't force them to do it. So I think you need to find the person within your organization who's actually bought in on the vision of like this personality-led growth approach and creating content consistently for their own personal brand. Like it can't just be, oh, I am, XYZ person leading the company and I want to talk about product the whole time and everything is me, and it's very salesy and, unappealing. I think if you can find somebody who's willing to speak about their own ideas and like basically, 80-20 or 90%, non-sales related, non-company related and 10% sales, I think that can be really effective. And at Hunters right now, I think we've established like our CEO, he doesn't really want to be the face of social media, but our CTO really is interested and wants to be out there, and he's got a really cool like at-home podcast setup where he's got a professional mic and a professional camera, and he's got probably more capacity in his role to take this on. So I think the message I would give other marketers and other companies is don't force it. If you're trying to make somebody the star of the show and they don't want to be that they don't want to play that role, you need to find somebody else. And once you find the right person who's able to work with you and partner on this personality-led growth for their own profile and also for the company, I think it can work really well.
Amazing. So outside of the CEO and CTO, have you seen it? I'm seeing yourself. Have you seen this personality-led growth approach be adopted by other members of the team, like other members of the sales team or subject matter experts within the business itself?
Yeah.
And is it a conscious thing that you're trying to push for this personality-led growth approach, or is it kind of more of an organic thing that's growing?
I think the challenge is people see the value. Like they see the value of, if you grow an audience and you're more likely to be accepted for like a call for papers for a conference, that can save the organization a huge amount of money. Like a speaking slot at one of these huge conferences could go for, big money.
Bet, yeah.
And if you can actually earn that speaking slot instead because you're active on social media and you've got strong opinions, that can be a huge win for the organization. I think the issue is we often want some of the busiest people in the organization to play this role of, contributing a lot on social media and speaking a lot publicly. And they don't have the time because they're getting pulled into customer issues or, big product decisions. So I think what I would encourage organizations to do is to think about how can you either take some stuff off this person's plate so that they can make, social media a priority and content creation a priority and travel to these events a priority? Or do you work with creators part-time and see, is this someone we can bring into the business? And their role will involve this, because I think we all underestimate how much time and effort this actually requires.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that holds so many businesses back, right? It's like we all understand the potential upsides, and the thing that typically holds businesses back is, it's like either I don't know what to say because I've got fear of how I'll be perceived or etc. Won't be the case for some of your experts. But then it's a case of time, right? And that exists for everyone, probably even more acute in a startup land. So you also mentioned like working with creators. Is that something that you've started exploring yet, or have you seen other businesses adopt that?
Yeah, we've started doing it. And
okay.
I think it's really, really valuable, really, really effective, especially when it's somebody who's got strong opinions about the space that you're operating in. So the actual state of the market. We work with a gentleman who was a Gartner analyst before, and he's also worked at other kind of competitive companies in the space. So working with him in a way that doesn't jeopardize his own credibility. So he's not, advocating for, buy this solution, this is the best solution. He's more so weighing in on thought leadership and advising, on our narrative, and also speaking on, either webinars or virtual events or in-person events. So I think that's extremely valuable. And it's something that our CMO wants to do more of. I think the only challenge is we would like to work with like a vast array of content creators, but it does take time from marketing to actually manage the relationships with all of these people, because they are the talent and you need to treat them accordingly.
And it needs a whole process around it. And I think that's such a powerful combination of activities when you've got the subject matter expertise within the business, making its kind of public face on LinkedIn, etc. And we'll talk about platforms in a second. And then you've got the independence of the creators backing that up too. And I think then you create a real and powerful groundswell of activity on social, because that's really where like that trust and the buyer advocacy is formed, right? And talking about that trust and buyer advocacy, thinking that you say you work in quite an old school space, but I guess your audience are still on social, hence the reason it's still a focus for you, right?
Yeah, they're definitely on social. And I think there are different types of persona that we speak to. We speak to like the C-level buyer, and then we also speak to the end user practitioner. And like those two personas in cybersecurity are completely different. Like, the higher level is very business focused, very KPI focused, very corporate, if you will. And then the practitioner is like super nerdy, like very in the details, like really cares how the technology works, like does not want to be marketed to in any type of way. So there's a lot of learning that goes on in terms of how do you speak to those two audiences.
I bet. So And I also expect that because selling like cybersecurity software, it's more of a consultative sell. This you're not selling widgets. This is a very mindful, meaningful purchase. So I'm guessing, you can tell me if I'm wrong, like your buyers would look to the experts within the business to be experts, to understand their craft. And I'm curious to know how like social might impact that and impact like the perception of the individuals within your business as truly being trusted experts in the space. Is that a thing?
Yeah, I think we're early. I think we're very early in our journey. And I think bringing in the CMO that we have currently, he really, really believes in the strategy. So
nice.
We need to keep going and just strengthen the consistency. I think the consistency is what we all struggle with. Same thing with my own my podcast, trying to keep consistent with that as like an employee with a full-time job and all of these other, life activities that we're all subscribed to too. So I think I'm confident in a year or so we'll have a much stronger story. We definitely have little anecdotes of things that are going well. I think many of the people who post consistently on social media get DMs or direct messages on LinkedIn saying, hey, like I really like this post, or when you post this, I always share it with my team. And I think those anecdotal feedback moments give people the encouragement to keep going. I think it takes much longer to see the impact in revenue, the impact in pipeline from those channels specifically. But if you can get the little nuggets of, hey, I went to this conference and somebody stopped by the booth and they said they subscribe to my content, be it they listened to a podcast episode we did, or they like this post that I wrote. I think if you can get your team in a position that they're feeling the impact of their work, I think you feel it before you actually see it in terms of the numbers.
Yeah, it's such a good point, actually. It's such a good point. And I often speak about the fact there just needs to be that belief, trust in the process, because we know that's how decisions are made. Decisions are made on trust and recommendation, and it's based on that gut feel, and it's very nuanced, this, right? And there's no way to it's very hard to prove out with data, and that's what so many businesses struggle with, because it's not like running a LinkedIn ad campaign. Like, did that creative work or not? We're not going to get that instant feedback, so it makes it hard to continue to invest in activities, initiatives like personality-led growth. But like you say, when you've got a CEO and a CMO and yourself that understands this process, knows it's a journey we're going on, that really helps, because it creates the foundation or the conditions for something like this to actually take hold, because it needs to be ingrained in the culture of a business. Sorry for the long waffle. Does that resonate?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the longer I work in marketing, the more I think we need to be social media first in terms of the distribution of everything we're doing, because you could write the best blog post in the world, but if nobody sees it, it's not going to make an impact on anybody. And I have, team members in sales that come to me and they're like, oh, I got 1,000 impressions on something. Like, explain to me, like, is that good? Is it bad? Is it great? Did I go viral? And I'm like, just think about it. 1,000, the impressions occurred to 1,000 people. I don't know if it's unique or not, but it's still a lot more exposure than, if we write a blog post. And we're one of the startups that are kind of impacted by SEO is such a long-term play. Mm-hmm. So from the get-go, we established this need in the market for the product very early, and then we received quite a bit of funding very quickly during 2021 type era, and we didn't have time to wait around for SEO to pick up. And one of my regrets as a marketing leader was not really taking SEO seriously enough. I wish 3 years ago we had invested more in SEO so that I would be paying off. You're not going to see any impact for a year, but now that I'm into my third year at Hunters, I wish we invested more and we were more intentional about the keywords we were trying to rank for. But the point of that decision that we made is we thought social media would give us a far better opportunity to actually get in front of the right people and create some buzz and stand out and be more progressive than our less progressive, more traditional competitors, let's say. So now we have 18,000 followers on social media. Like, my goal is to get to 20,000 over the summer, and it will be a big milestone. I know a lot of people say that social media followers is just vanity metrics and it's nonsense and no one should pay attention, but it's actually a really important metric for us at Hunters, because we made this conscious effort to invest more in social than in SEO and in our blog, and I think it's paid off for us. But again, I think we're only at the beginning of our journey.
And I think I appreciate that and respect the humility, because, you know, we can only do what we can at the time with the information that we have, right? So I think hindsight's always 20/20, right? We could always look back and go, I wish I'd done that, etc. And like, a great organic marketing strategy always involves multiple facets, and it's never like, you know, all in on one channel. So I definitely feel that on SEO. SEO is also a very interesting juncture at the moment too, as it's becoming inherently more social anyway, search, which is going to be a fascinating thing to watch play out. But yeah, going back to Hunters, actually something I want to pick up, not on Hunters actually at this point. I want to kind of pivot it slightly to your own personal brand, and we'll go back to Hunters LinkedIn content. But in you doing the, you know, growing from 1,000 to 7,000 on LinkedIn and starting the podcast around it, what really drove that growth for you? I appreciate people could go ahead and listen to your podcast and probably get the description, but what's the TLDR?
I don't think I've covered as much of my own growth. I think with the podcast, I've mostly been curious to hear about other people's growth. So maybe this is kind of uncharted territory. But I think
I'm getting exclusive here.
You're getting an exclusive, yeah. I think, you know, if you're familiar with Chris Walker and Refine Labs, Chris was the first marketing person I listened to and really thought, oh my goodness, like he's saying things that he's talking about the things that I've been questioning with my own CMO, but nobody has really been brave enough to say it. And I think with marketing throughout the years, like marketers want to be liked and they want to be respected in their craft, but I think traditionally haven't been brave enough to really stand for something and say, okay, like this is the right way of doing something. Like, why are we doing this? Like, this shouldn't be the case anymore. So I was really inspired by Chris's courage and bravery to really speak out. And the CMO I was working for at the time, who was a wonderful CMO, Latal Asher Dotan, she recently got a new job at Beyond Identity. She's a CMO there. Before that, she was a CMO at Hunters and Tamer. So we worked together for 4 years. And she's the first leader I've worked for that was extremely brave to advocate for not only marketing, but like effective marketing, and to advocate for just cutting out the nonsense and not doing certain things because we don't believe in them and they don't work. And she would always approach things as like, okay, what should we not be doing anymore? Versus usually it's like, what more can we add to our plates? And like you said there, it's not about going all in on one channel. We need to do a multitude of things. But like, if you're a really, really lean marketing team starting an early stage startup, like, can you actually afford to do all of these things? Like, you can't afford to do all of them well. So her and I, having worked together previously, we were like, okay, what are we going to do differently this time? And I documented a lot of that, what we're doing differently and what we don't believe in anymore. And part of the enjoyment of working with her was every call we would get on, we would just have this kind of really empowering and methodology driven
that one.
Just this real like challenging a thesis or challenging assumptions. Always. So we were just like going back and forth, like, is this really the way? Looking at conversion rates, looking at how much we spent versus what we got in return, and just trying to question everything that we were doing. So leaving conversations with her, I was really, really inspired, and I was like, I'm going to write a LinkedIn post about this. And I just started writing and posting, and people reacted to it really well. And so that was really my approach to like growing to 7K. And then, you know, in the effort of being very transparent and candid with listeners, especially listeners maybe who are working full-time jobs and they want to grow their own personal brand, but they're working, you know, for a CEO and they want to do both things. I do think it's possible. You can have your own personal brand and work for a corporation. I just think in certain aspects, everything is very black and white. Like, this is the way, like, SEO is dead. Like, those types of decisions or like thought tracks that I was having at that time, I think is a little bit naive in some instances, because what I've come to learn now is every single organization is different. I speak to founders and leaders of startups very frequently who are asking me for advice. How do we get started with social media? How do we build a following? What's the best approach? Where should we be spending our marketing budget early days? And it's always a different answer. I always ask them so many questions about their own business and their own circumstances and what they're trying to achieve before preaching any of my, former, what I thought was wisdom at them. So I think some of the posts that I wrote definitely still stand by to this moment. But I think some of it is a bit, I don't know, like I don't think anyone should see themselves as like a marketing guru giving advice to other marketers. It's more so my own experience and my thought process for working through challenges. The things that I will kind of die on a hill for with marketing, the list is getting shorter and shorter because I just think there's so much nuance.
I love that. And it's such a refreshing attitude to have, because especially when you've been posting on social and you get known for something, it becomes very tempting to fight your corner and argue your case as to why your model or your thoughts around this was correct. So I really respect that level of humility. And it goes to show, I think there's a lot of marketers that can learn a lot from that mindset, because there really are no rules. We're constantly evolving and learning and changing, and your approach to challenging the status quo, like that's basically a pattern throughout most of the stuff you've done. Like, look at something, challenge it, pick it apart, try and get really focused on the things that really matter. I really respect that. Sounds very simple, but in reality, it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to think about the new shiny thing. It's easy just to, like you say, add more, do more with less. But it's harder to say no, get focused, and be super crystal clear with the real finer points of what you want to achieve. So yeah, really respect that. Flipping back onto Hunters and LinkedIn company page growth, growing to 18K, etc. Going to go a little more tactical at this point. So LinkedIn primary platform, I'm guessing, from what you've been saying so far.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any particular reason for that, or?
I think my own personal preference, but I think Facebook just became like a undesirable place for many, like in the early teens of like
I'm with you.
Yeah. And then Twitter became an undesirable place for many people in the early 2020s. So I think things are changing. I think my boss is convinced that Facebook is coming back, and that will be a place that we should be. And, you know, the whole metaverse in terms of, do you run social media advertising for B2B on Instagram? I think you need, if you really, really want to test the theory, I think you just need to invest there in terms of like people to actually own it and run it and believe in it. For myself, LinkedIn is something that I've just tried to study very, very carefully and keep up with all of the updates. So I personally love to use LinkedIn for B2B marketing. I love it from an actual person's profile. And then I think the corporate page is a challenge, especially if you're trying to grow from the start. There are natural things that are always a huge hit on your LinkedIn corporate page, like unfortunately, fundraising is one of the biggest things where if you are able to raise a round of funding, to maximize that completely, where you just get a lot of coverage and it's a good opportunity to kind of be in front of a lot of people, and a lot of people celebrate that with you. I think in-person events, in-person activities, if you're either in a cool office, or you're visiting a cool office, right? For me in this case, I think that type of content people really like. They want to see the people behind the brand. They want to see if you can create cool swag, cool merchandise. We did for a conference a couple of years ago, branded beer cans that had like our product branding on the actual beer can. And we did it while we were sponsoring a cruise around London, like a cruise on the Thames. So it was like a party on a cruise during a conference with branded beers, and the content just looked amazing. So naturally people went wild for it on social media. So I think if you can think more like a B2C marketer when it comes to LinkedIn, with your company page, I think that can work really well. I think what doesn't work is just using it as just distribution of, hey, we posted this blog post, here's like the blog post on the company page, and like the link is in the comments, go read it. Like I think that type of content really does not work. I don't think it's worth your time and your energy. I think you need to optimize for zero-click content.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to zero in on that, like optimize for zero-click content, basically consumption in the feed here. So such an important point. And coming from someone that leads demand gen, that's a quite different paradigm to think about, isn't it? So
yeah, I'm not the average
yeah, exactly.
person.
Where's no CTR on that? Yeah. So and this is why it kind of fascinates me with you, like your ability to balance the duality between super revenue focused, target driven, metrics driven, and trust in the process. There is an element of magic and human connection here, and being able to not hang your hat on either one of those as the sole way to go. It feels like your approach is really balanced between the both. It's appreciating the nuance and the balance between them. Fair? Or
I think more so as I progress in my career, I am aware that you can't just kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of like what my comment about it, SEO. It's like there are things that I need to do as a marketing leader. Like we need to do certain things as a marketing team. And then there are things that we want to do as a marketing team. So if we can do the things we need to do as quickly, as efficiently as possible, we have more time to do the things we really want to do. And I think that is my constant motivation in marketing, because the things I need to do, they don't fill me with energy, but the things that I want to do and that the team wants to do, and the things that really move the needle, those are I think the thing that really keep me going in this very demanding career path.
Yeah, you didn't make life easy on yourself, did you, Sarah?
I had no idea what I was getting into, Randy. now it's too late for me.
Amazing. So, like, talking about the things that give you energy and like next steps, etc. So, what excites you about the future? Where are you going? What other things are you testing? We didn't speak about paid ads as well, which I'd be interested to touch on. So, yeah, talk me through some of the from the lens of social as well, particularly where you're going to be experimenting next and what your plans are.
So, for my full-time role, I'm hosting like a breakfast event for the first time at our partner Snowflake's office in London. So my plan, unless it changes, is to moderate the panel, and I've got different speakers. And if you're trying to pull an event like this together for a startup that has no kind of blueprint of here's how we run events like this, it's a very challenging task, but it's also, it fits into the category of like things I want to do versus the things I need to do. Yeah. So going above and beyond to make sure we have great speakers who are like really, really interesting to our audience, to the type of person we want to speak with. Also trying to record it professionally so that knowing the joy of events, anyone who works in events knows that whoever registers, like, you can expect 50% or fewer to show up on the day just because life gets in the way and events are hard. So pulling off that event is like my next immediate project. And the reason I bring it up is because I think the future in social media is actually capturing the stories that people really want to hear, and from people who are interesting in their own authentic way. So if we're able to capture those people, whether it's like people that work in an organization that's like selling software, or whether it's the buyers, the end users of software who are, fighting threats or solving the hardest accounting challenges, I think being able to tap into who those individuals are, getting them to tell their story in an authentic, engaging way, and then being able to distribute it in an effective way where, we don't need things to really go viral. I think virality it's cool, it's interesting, but it's not the most effective way to grow your business, right? You kind of get lucky when you go viral in ways, and often it doesn't really pay off in the way that you expect it to.
100% agree. I wish everyone could hear that. I've been talking about this for so long, and in the occasional moments where like I've seen a few of your posts go viral on LinkedIn, but I mean, there's no real categorization of viral, but I'll say anything over 1,000 likes.
It feels viral.
It feels viral, yeah. You probably get a lot of DMs, etc. And it's happened to me a couple of times, but like the quality of the DMs is inversely proportional to the quantity of likes and engagements. It just feels like you just get a load of meaningless dross because it just goes broad. And the beauty about when you do social right is you aren't going broad. You know who you're trying to serve, and you're trying to deliver the most meaningful story, to your point, to the people that matter, the people that should care about it. And virality, it's fine. You're not going to argue with it, but it throws all of that out, and it then just becomes, it's like a display ad, just goes everywhere. And we all know display ads. You ever seen any good performance from a display ad? You might. I
haven't. I don't bias anybody. It's working for you. Great. Don't be. I'm not your marketing guru.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We shouldn't hold our beliefs too close to heart. But yes, I should learn a thing or two from you, Sarah, maybe about being.
Over time, you'll get there.
I love it. I feel like I'm getting smarter as a result of this podcast.
I'm glad. Me too.
Yeah. So, yeah. Sorry about the tangent. Yeah, 100% agreed. I think we both agree on like virality. And so probably just completely derailed this conversation.
Another point on that, I think, to hammer it home, we often like if you want to go not viral, but if you want to write a post that will be very well received by your marketing counterparts on LinkedIn, you write something like, don't work for a CEO, doesn't get marketing, right? Every marketer's, amen, sister, like, preaching to the choir, okay? Yeah. But I think what we forget is people who don't work in marketing. So like whether it's your executive team or it's your customer success counterparts or your counterparts in sales, they're not living, breathing, eating marketing in the way that we do, right? We're total nerds for marketing, and we have a marketing shaped brain. So what's really obvious to us, like they don't really understand. And oftentimes they do want to understand, they want to learn. So I think part of this going from like, naive marketer that I was a few years ago to somebody who I think is a little bit more wise, right? Still has, room to grow there. But what I've picked up is our job as marketers is to educate people who don't know as much about marketing. Like they may think they know a lot about marketing, but they're not what I just described, which is how I would describe you and I, right? Total nerds for marketing shaped brain, living it, breathing it every single day. Your counterparts in other areas of the business don't understand that. So if they think the goal of marketing is to go viral, that completely puts every, KPI out of whack. It's not a good thing to aim for. And I think if you're trying to repeat virality, it's extremely difficult to achieve. And like an example of virality in B2C that everybody knows is like this woman who had the Stanley Cup in her car, and the car burnt down, but the Stanley Cup remained, and the CEO of Stanley or somebody in Stanley bought her a new car.
Yeah. Like
Stanley can't repeat that. Like if the goal of the Stanley marketing team is to go viral, what are they supposed to do? Like set more cars on fire? Like it does not. It's not a reasonable goal. Yeah. And not going to help them sell more Stanley. So I think in B2B, we also need to think the same way. It's like, are you trying to be on the cover of the Daily Mail? No, like not if you're selling cybersecurity. That's absolutely not what you want if you're selling cybersecurity. So I think you need to rethink, you know, the virality metric. I don't think it's really relevant. I think what you need to establish is what are your individual goals for your organization based on your size, based on your audience, and go and try to achieve that.
Yeah, I love that. Probably the best description of why going viral doesn't really matter I've ever heard from someone. So thank you for that.
I appreciate it.
Going back to the point, yeah, that was a big tangent on that one. But
we got
good.
Fired up on that one. Pun intended.
This is clearly our trigger word. But anyway, telling authentic stories. You're going to do this event, and I guess those really well shot, and those stories from like the panelists and the questions, etc., will then be Hunter's next social content on LinkedIn.
100%. I hope it'll be the content that brings us through the rest of the summer, and I hope it'll be an event. I'm trying to convince my CMO boss currently that like he really thinks volume is the way to go, that like it's just we got to do more in front of more people, and we shouldn't be in charge of like getting people to certain events. And I respect his opinion as someone who's far more experienced than I am, but I am a stickler for quality. I really just want quality marketing, quality stories, quality in-person engagements with people. Like I want to meet people and feel like, wow, we connected with that person and we could really help solve the problem they're solving or the challenge they're having. I really want those things, and maybe that means that I'm not destined to be like a big corporate marketer in the future because I don't want to play the volume game. But I think for me, like what I'm focused on now is we have a meetup in London for demand gen professionals, and it also, you don't have to work specifically in demand gen or have demand gen in your title, but if you're somebody who's trying to create demand for your organization, we run that meetup probably every 6 weeks or so with my counterpart George Boot. So you can send me a direct message there if you want to get involved. And then the other thing I'm passionate about is I don't think we're really gonna make the marketing industry, a better place by only keeping these conversations about marketing, specifically having them with other marketers. Like, even though it feels like therapy, I don't think we're really solving the problem unless we speak to CEOs, co-founders, product leaders, customer success leaders, sales leaders, and educate them. Like, take a different approach to the conversation and answer their questions about marketing, and not answering them from a defensive way or defensive perspective either. Genuinely meeting them where they are and discussing these questions that they have, and really talking about like, what does doing effective marketing look like? What does it really mean?
I love it. Absolutely love it. What a wonderful way. I think we'll end on that note, Sarah. And thank you so much. This has been absolute gold. And I think there's so much people can learn from you in terms of your balanced approach to things, your challenging of the status quo, and like that humility that kind of transcends everything that you do, from what I've been hearing from you over the last half an hour or so, and how you want to share that across the rest of the team. And it kind of made me think about, I need to think about the positioning of this podcast, because yeah, absolutely, we all get it as marketers, but it's about the rest of the organization truly understanding the value of what we do. Because we started this conversation with us talking about like the power of personality-led growth and believing in the magic, and you being fortunate to join an organization that kind of gets it, and so you're empowered to do it. But many organizations aren't. So I think it's all on us to try and collectively educate. So I really respect that. So thank you, basically, all that to say. Really appreciate you joining today.
Thanks for having me, Andy. And I'm honored to be a guest on the show, and really happy to hopefully continue the conversation later.
Definitely will do. Amazing. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much for watching or listening, and we'll be back next time with some more B2B leaders sharing more of their expertise around how they build brands and how they drive growth through content and community. Be sure to click like and subscribe to help this podcast grow, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.